What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily, and in this video, we're going to be doing a full comparison between the Samsung Galaxy Note 20 Ultra and the regular Note 20. Now, I know there's been a lot of discussion about the differences between these two phones already. The regular Note 20 has even received some criticism, given that it lacks a lot of the features it maybe should have had, given its price. But I wanted to take the time to go over all the differences here in this video, especially now that I've had these phones for a little while. I'll offer up my thoughts on whether some of these things are important, and in the end, I'll let you know which phone I think you should probably buy if you're considering either of these Note 20s. Obviously, there's a lot to go over in this video, so I won't waste any more time. Let's just go ahead and get right into it and see what these phones have to offer. So first off, let's talk about the price differences and the color options you can choose from with each phone. The regular Note 20 starts at $999, and depending on where in the world you're located, you'll have some color options including green, bronze, gray, red, and blue. You may also have the option to get either a 128GB model or 256GB model, but the RAM is all the same, 8GB. With the Note 20 Ultra, this phone starts at $1,299, so $300 more than the regular Note 20. This phone has just 3 color options, bronze, black, and white, and it also has 2 storage options you may be able to choose from, 256GB or 512GB, but the same 12GB of RAM with each of those options. Now, right away, I do want to talk about the difference in materials with these two phones, because I think this is probably what most people have the biggest issue with. The rear housing of the standard Note 20 is plastic. It's that sort of smooth, soft touch, almost frosted look, but when you tap it or feel it with your finger, you can tell without a doubt that it is plastic. With the Note 20 Ultra, the rear housing with this phone is that shiny, premium glass finish. And I think given the price points with both of these devices, this higher quality build is what people would expect. While the regular Note 20 doesn't exactly feel cheap with its plastic housing, and it is still a nice looking phone too, I just think it's the idea behind it, the principle of the thing. The fact that for $1,000 you're getting a plastic phone, that's just not the best value. But I will say this. The black and white Note 20 Ultras are a shiny gloss finish with their glass, while the copper Note 20 Ultra is a frosted glass. And you may not like what I have to say here about this, but to be totally honest, the frosted glass on the copper Note 20 Ultra and the sort of frosted matte plastic on the regular Note 20 look and feel pretty close. Can you still tell the copper Note 20 Ultra is glass? Yes, it's a little thicker and a little harder of a material when you touch it, but the difference isn't as obvious as holding up the glossy glass against the plastic. In the end, it doesn't really matter what either phone is made of. The color and the finish and even the materials really are more a matter of personal preference. And with these phones, there's no limitations as far as going with plastic or going with glass. Both the Note 20 and Note 20 Ultra offer wireless charging and reverse wireless charging, which is great. And one might even be able to argue that the plastic is more durable than glass, while on the other hand, Samsung did upgrade the glass on the Note 20 Ultra. But I get it. It's the fact that for $1,000 or more, you should be getting the best, most premium materials on any given smartphone. And Samsung decided to, for whatever reason, not offer that with the standard Note 20. Physically, these two phones also have entirely different designs as well. And the first most obvious thing I think is their size. The regular Note 20 is a 6.7-inch phone, while the Note 20 Ultra is a 6.9-inch phone. Now, realistically, these are both huge phones anyway, and the 0.2 of an inch difference is not that big of a deal when you hold these phones side by side. They're some of the largest smartphones you can get just in general right now, and they're both a lot to handle with one hand. Basically, the smaller Note 20 isn't that much smaller at all, and either way, you're going to end up with a huge phone in your pocket. Design-wise, the Note 20 Ultra has also a sharper, more boxy design paired with curved front glass, while the standard Note 20 has a flat panel and less extreme design cues. It's a little hard to explain, so hopefully you can just see it with a side-by-side view, but the Note 20 Ultra has sharper corners, both with the physical edges of the phone itself and with how the screen comes to a corner as well. And you might be able to see that subtle curve to the front screen on the Ultra as well. It's not nearly as extreme as previous phones, but it's there. And while it sort of makes the phone feel maybe a little thinner and a bit more premium, I know nowadays not everyone really appreciates a curved display. And at least with its function, the curved screen doesn't yield you anything on the Ultra. Both phones have the same Edge software features for shortcuts and things that we've seen on a lot of Samsung phones, regardless of the curve. So it's more just a design element for aesthetics more than anything else. Taking a look around at all the other stuff, the phones are set up pretty much the same. The left side doesn't have anything at all, no Bixby button or anything like that. The right has the power and volume buttons. Now up top, there is an important difference. With the regular Note 20, the SIM card tray is just that, SIM only. But the Note 20 Ultra has expandable storage. So you can pop in a SIM card and an SD card, which once again is just one more limitation with the regular Note 20. Down below, of course, both phones have the S Pen, the speakers, and the USB-C charging port. With the speakers, both devices do offer dual stereo sound with a secondary speaker in the earpiece. And just as a side note, you might also be able to tell that the front camera cutout is much larger on the standard Note 20 versus the Ultra, which is sort of interesting. Around back, of course, there is a huge difference in the camera setups, which I'll go over in just a bit. But physically, you can also see the camera module on the Note 20 Ultra is just massive. A lot of people have touched on this already, so I won't harp on it, but it's really hard to understand just how much of a bump it is until you feel it with your hands. It's thick, it's tall, it's obvious, and when compared to the camera bump on the regular Note 20, this phone almost feels like there's no bump at all. Both phones also have an in-display fingerprint reader, which seems to be equally as fast, and they also have Face Unlock as well, which to me seems identical. But when we get into the actual screens, once again, there are some really important differences worth talking about. On the surface, you're dealing with pretty nice Super AMOLED Plus displays with both phones, which is great. They offer fantastic viewing experiences in general, but the actual specs here are very different. With the 6.7-inch regular Note 20, this phone has a 2400 by 1080 resolution screen that packs in 393 pixels per inch. And that's it. There's no high refresh rate, no QHD resolution, no real special features. The Note 20 Ultra's 6.9-inch screen is a higher resolution panel, a QHD 3088 by 1440p display packing in 496 pixels per inch, and it's also a high refresh rate screen with a 120 Hz option. Now, what's important to note here is that you have to choose which sort of feature you want, either the QHD resolution at the normal 60 Hz or the 120 Hz at 1080p resolution. You can't have both at the same time, but at least this phone offers both options with the display. If you've never experienced a high refresh rate phone, it's basically like having a super smooth experience that feels even more snappy and more responsive. And in person, I think it's more obvious than it shows on camera. It's great to have, and I personally prefer the high refresh rate over the high resolution since I have to choose anyway. And once again, I feel like a lot of people were just disappointed with the fact that the standard Note 20 offered neither of these screen upgrades. The thing is, there's nothing wrong with a regular Note 20 screen at all, just as it is. It looks great, but when phones like the OnePlus Nord offer a high refresh rate display and come in at significantly less money, it's just not a great look. And furthermore, having this phone be $1,000 and not offering these upgrades to the display makes it feel like too much of a compromise, especially if the screen is something that's really important to you. There's one other difference with the screens that I do want to talk about, and this actually has to do with the S Pen. Both the Note 20 and Note 20 Ultra received upgrades when it comes to latency, which is the delay between the movement of the S Pen compared to the actual line being drawn. With last year's Note 10, that phone had about 42 milliseconds of latency. The regular Note 20 this year knocked that down to 26 milliseconds, which is a great improvement. The S Pen certainly feels more accurate, but the Note 20 Ultra goes even further by by offering around 9 milliseconds. Again, it might be hard to catch on camera, but the Ultra just feels that much more accurate when drawing or writing. The tip of the pen seems to be a lot closer to the actual line being drawn, and it's honestly as close to a real-time line as I've ever seen. I think heavy S Pen users will appreciate this a lot on the Ultra, and while I don't necessarily want to knock the improvements of the regular Note 20, again, this is just one more area where you are getting more going with the Ultra. So I know I already went over this at the start of the video, but I want to offer a little more insight with the specs and configuration options here, since that is pretty important. Like I said already, the regular Note 20 can be purchased with either 128 or 256 gigabytes of storage and 8 gigabytes of RAM. But remember, this phone does not have an SD card slot. The Ultra ships with either 256 or 512 gigabytes of storage and 12 gigabytes of RAM, and it also has that SD card slot. While those internal specs differ quite a bit, what is the same here is actually the processor inside each phone. These two Note 20s will either have the Exynos 990 or Qualcomm Snapdragon 865 Plus, depending on where in the world you're located. So that's great, and you basically just need to decide if you need more RAM and or more storage for your phone. Performance-wise, these phones launch and load apps in practically the same time. You won't notice a difference out of the box, but as you load more and more apps and as time goes on, the Note 20 Ultra with its more RAM should be able to keep things current and updated and running in the background more easily. And with dozens of apps loaded, when you launch more graphics heavy stuff like a game, for example, the Note 20 Ultra should be a little better and a little faster in handling it all. We're talking like fractions of a second here though. Both these phones are absolutely powerhouse devices with the latest version of Android and Samsung's newest One UI 2.5 update. So I wouldn't get too caught up in everyday performance necessarily. If you do want the top of the line, best of the best, most spec'd out phone with the most built-in storage and the option to throw in an SD card as well, the Ultra is your answer. But the regular Note 20 isn't underpowered at all. It's still a flagship phone with flagship specs, and unlike some of the other compromises that I mentioned earlier, I don't necessarily think the lower RAM option is as big of a deal as the missing SD card slot is, to be totally honest. Finally, let's talk cameras, because this is once again something that a lot of people are considering to be a huge difference with these phones. The standard Note 20 has a very respectable triple lens setup, which includes a 12 megapixel main lens, 64 megapixel telephoto lens, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide lens. The Note 20 Ultra, on the other hand, has an insane 108 megapixel main lens, 12 megapixel telephoto lens, and 12 megapixel ultra wide lens. Now, in general, the features and the shooting modes and the options you have here are going to be nearly the same on both phones. You can even shoot up to 8K video with both devices too, which is just crazy. The two biggest differences I see here functionality wise are with the main lenses and with the zoom lenses. With the regular Note 20, you can technically shoot at high resolution at up to 64 megapixels, which is pretty impressive. But the Note 20 Ultra has a 108 megapixel shooting mode. But with the telephoto lenses, this is where things get even more interesting. The regular Note 20 has a decent 3 times hybrid zoom and a max total zoom of 30 times. The Note 20 Ultra, on the other hand, has a 5 times optical zoom, which means it's using the lens hardware, and up to 50 times hybrid zoom. To put it simply, the Ultra can zoom on incredibly far away things, and it's honestly totally usable. For example, here's a broad shot of a night scene, and you can sort of see the moon up above. When I use the full force of both zoom lenses, I can literally get a clear shot of the moon with both phones actually, but the results on the Note 20 Ultra are significantly better. It's closer, it's sharper, and it's just a super impressive result for a smartphone camera. Is the crazy zoom a useful feature for everyday shooting? No, not really, but it just goes to show the potential potential of both phones, honestly, but particularly the Ultra. So here are my final thoughts. The Note 20 Ultra is obviously the ultimate phone. It's got no compromises and packs just about everything you might want. The standard Note 20 is still a great phone. It's a Note device after all, so it packs a lot. But this time around, I think Samsung just cut out too much in comparison. The plastic rear housing isn't as big of a deal in my mind, but the 1080 60Hz screen is a bummer. No SD card is a bummer. And for $1,000, really nothing should be a bummer with this phone. If you have the money to spend, just making the jump up to the Ultra is 100% worth it. And I don't think you should consider the standard Note 20 until you can get this phone for maybe $700 somewhere. That's about the price I'd pay for it anyway. So there you go. That's everything you need to know about the Note 20 and Note 20 Ultra. What do you guys think about these devices? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below, of course, but hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.